folks, Richard Moore, and it's a beautiful Sunday, and I've going to try to keep this as brief as possible, but it may not be possible. And this will be a continuation of this series that may never end, and for several reasons I don't think it should. And this series of the killing fields of Rose Hill. And so if you're not familiar with the series and the other stories that I've covered and what Rose Hill is and what the killing fields pertains to, then you can check out that playlist. If you're not a subscriber, I don't think it costs anything to subscribe. Some people are acting like it does. I don't think it does. Exposure and of what we talk about here at USA GSA is our primary motive in what we're doing. And of course, we want to recognize the victims across this country and globally that have somehow found themselves caught between life and death, in most cases, of being on the wrong side of a very corrupt program and called community-oriented policing. But just know that you're not on the wrong side of what is right and just and legal. That would be on the side of the victims. And so the days are numbered for those that participate in this and somehow have convinced themselves that what they're doing is something good, and nothing could be further from the truth. But enough of that. This has been something that, like with a lot of the stories I do, I'm real reluctant. The reason I'm reluctant is because it takes an emotional toll when you have to revisit things, but it's not something that that I don't believe everybody is. They may not be prepared for it. And I don't know how you prepare for it, but I think that I'm going to do this one. And this is about a man, and of course, I'm going to leave the last names. I'm just going to give you some basics. I'm going to give you what the newspapers didn't give you, and I think that we can all take something away from that, and this tells a whole lot about my story as well. So I want to make sure I've got the year right, and this man. And many people that live in Chickasaw County may not know who I'm talking about. And I hope that changes. Because I believe that if we let the memories and the lives of those that did make their mark in history, and that they did do something, in fact, substantial, and maybe some of those things haven't been realized. Some families are seeing that they're seeing a lot of things happen because in the wake of a loved one's death, where in fact they're speaking from the grave. They're still at work. And so I don't think that this is any exception to the rule. Would be classic. So to be as brief as possible, I know that when we talk about a prodigal, and there's plenty of people watching me right now that have maybe a prodigal son or daughter, or maybe a brother or sister, or a partner, a spouse, that for whatever reasons you love them, that'll never stop. A lot of people can't understand that. Yeah, I don't think a parent will, regardless of what that child does, it's impossible for that parent not to still have love for their child. And many have been in relationships that have taken them to death's door because of that unselfish and unrelenting, unquestionable devotion that they have to that other person. And many people can be misguided in that, but many people, that is natural. That's part of God's natural order. So, and part of evil's natural order is to destroy that which is good, and hence the battle. So coming off of nearly a 10-year stint of having my life taken away from me, and from being set up by corrupt law enforcement and everything within the power of the federal government and the state to destroy every element about my life. That was what they did. That was the intention. And so when that happens to a person, you can't prepare for that. And so once I'm back into society, I can't tell you how I felt or the way it was. There's no way to articulate that, what it was like. But it was definitely a stranger in a foreign land. Nothing was real. Nothing was like you thought it would. Or I mean, it's beyond explanation. And of course, at this point in my life, I'm wondering, well, God, that's I never blamed these calamities on God. He didn't put me there. He brought me through them. Somehow that my faith and understanding of those years that I should have, some people would have spent in bitterness and hate for those that dared to do the despicable things. I had trouble harboring hate for another human being. I always say, well, that's a fault, something was wrong with that. But, God says it's, how can you say that you love me, but yet you hate your fellow man? He has a problem with that. And so goes the deal. And, C.S. Lewis once said that we're not bodies with souls, but we're souls with bodies waiting. He infers that what many of you that are watching may understand this as well, that if you've ever said, well, I'm an old soul, I feel like I've lived, and this is not a reincarnation segment or anything like that, but for those that are old souls and aware of it, then you know what I'm talking about. And it's very rare that you meet another old soul and that and you know it, and they know it, and that can come and a younger person, an older person, a male, female, it doesn't matter. And so that happened. And this happened to be a young man. So almost immediately, of seeing him in passing, and maybe spoke a word or two, it was just odd, not weird, or just, it was something that I couldn't put my finger on it. I had no idea. And mind you, I was already grappling with this new world, and so that was quickly dismissed. I said, well, I'm toast. I'll never be able to do anything. My mind's gone. But it wasn't long. Those things started coming to fruition. My suspicions were satisfied. What I didn't bargain for was I didn't have any concept of community-oriented policing, this program. Once you're targeted, you're always targeted. And I thought I knew what good meant, and I thought I knew what evil meant. And oh, how I was mistaken. And so I meet a man that I've never met. This young man's dad. And this is who this video is about. The name is French. It's spelled just like it sounds. Villion. Villion. Couldn't think of a better name, especially for this story. But around here, folks called him Villion. And so either way, I believe that Villion would be the most acceptable way. Without knowing the story, I knew that he wasn't in the picture. And as I'm talking with his son, I'm kind of laying it out as if that he would attest to the same thing. It's like, how did you know? I didn't. It was just one of those things that you know. And it's hard to understand someone unless you've walked in their shoes, and to see the pain and the hurt that is caused when you're a product of a broken home. My parents were divorced around 10 or 11. It wasn't an abusive deal or whatever. I mean, it didn't work. Two different personalities. I mean, verbally abusive, but not physically abusive. And so it was a little different with Villion. And as people in the community would recognize the son, and then they would always talk about the dad, you'd hear the same thing. I don't believe I ever heard anybody say anything just horribly negative, or even negative at all. I heard that if you made him mad, he'd fight you. I said, well, that sounds like my dad. He was a damn hard worker. Sound like my dad. One of the best football players that ever graced the presence of that town. That sound like my dad. It was just so many things. And as this goes on, I realize that I'm actually going through and living the life and being hit with the same thing that caused this absentee dad, because at this point, it had been several years, I think the last 5 or 6 years of his life, that he didn't see his son. And that bothered him, both of them. The pain, the hurt from that, we'll never know. We can only imagine. The pain growing up as a young man, and another man being in the house, but it's not your dad, and you want to see your dad. And every time you do something that is considered negative, you're constantly reminded that you're just like Villion in a negative. So getting that negative reinforcement. Now, what was it about this community and the mindset that was so stringent on this, that so much so that a man that obviously was not scared to go anywhere, loved life, never met a stranger, a survivor, many times homeless, and at other times in the lap of luxury. He was his own person. He refused to be a conformist. He was a nonconformist. He refused to force himself to fit in to this impossible world of the white picket fence and roll your sleeves up and go to church and tell the truth and all this stuff and that we see on Mayberry RFD, that we know that many people set out to live this life and they're miserable. And when he would kick against that, many times he'd do what a lot of people do. And he'd drink. My daddy could drink. Oh, Lord. So could Villion. I'm talking enough to whiskey to you could float a iron wedge. Plenty. And still be walking and able to drive. And it'd be hard to tell that he'd had a gallon of wild turkey and be talking to you driving 70 miles an hour. It just certain people, and Villion fit that same deal. His love for animals, the arts, and life, music, somehow that passed down rightfully so. I was quick to say, I know you've heard this all your life, and you've heard this in a negative connotation. I said, but consider that a positive. A positive. God forbid you were made to feel like that you were like everybody else. That's a good thing. There's many things that people will talk about that they didn't agree, or they had heard this or that, rumor and innuendo, and at the end of the day, it's nobody's business. That's the problem with people these days, is they're so busy in other people's business and worrying about what other people are doing. And the only reason they're doing that is because they cannot bear to look at themselves in the mirror. None of us. And because of this element and this community of people that have this mindset, and they have cast their lot with the community-oriented policing, where it's okay. This is another religion, another gospel. It's not of God. God's Spirit does not roam about seeking whom it may devour, killing, stealing, and destroying. That is evil's job. So you can imagine a man that loves his son more than life itself. And that is without any fear of exaggeration. Knowing that when he would have to, when he would get to visit and so forth, he knew what the son was getting on the negative end about the dad. And the more the dad would be in the picture, obviously, the more the negative. He somehow was trying to protect him by staying out of the equation. How many people today feel like that? You don't go around friends and family because you've got such a cloud of morons creeping around. You don't want to bring that calamity on them. Somehow he was protecting, and that's only those that are in these situations can understand what I'm saying. It's dang if you do, dang if you don't. And I realized that as I became very close, I was experiencing these same things. Betrayal, and the unspeakable that it's not even worth talking about. I realized in within about a year, I said the very thing that this clutch of people are doing to me and using you, this is exactly what they did to your dad. Now, it's not being done to you. Somehow it had already been done. Maybe somehow it was a way of, who knows? Only God knows. Only God knows. But to a fault of losing my freedom more than once, and being at the brink of death more than once, of trying to grapple and save a situation that was not meant to be grappled and saved, but everything for such a time as this. You know, when God puts something together, no matter what you're going through, when God's in it, the devil's going to come knocking. And he will unleash hell, especially for those that have a calling, for those that have, and we all, I believe, have these callings, but it's for different things. But this destruction and evil of what I know about this program and how it destroys lives and how they don't care about the people that they use on the front line to attack other people. They're expendable. They're expendable. Whether they know it or not, they're expendable. I think deep down they do know it. I was already in. All my chips were in. And that took its toll. But I didn't give up. When the rest of the world said, "Oh, that's a wrap." When I said it's a wrap, when he said it's a wrap, somehow we know it's not a wrap. And that's how God works. I'll never forget the day I was called and given the news that Villion had passed away. He was in Biloxi. He spent the last 2 years of his life in his birthplace, Gulfport. He was 44 years old. It's too young. It's too young. They said an extended illness. We don't know. It could have been related to. But you know, sometimes people look at those that maybe abuse drugs and alcohol and they just threw their life away. And I'm going to tell you, that's not my call nor your call to make. You don't base success in life off what you do in comparison to what other people do. It's based on what you do in comparison to what you could have done. And as I got the obituary, of course, just like he was estranged from his son, I was too estranged from that same individual. But nevertheless, I was stricken immediately with grief because he lived for that reunion. He had so much, and that was taken. That was taken. That's what this program does, folks. That's what it does. And at a time when it's easy to jump ship, and there's something about me and the individual I'm talking about. And bridge burning. We are two people that love to burn bridges. We don't care because We never took the bridge anyway. Everywhere we went in life, we went the hard way, the long way, through the valley. So we didn't care about the bridges anyway. Well, it's all in the right perspective. And I got right in the middle of this dynamic of how this generational deal of how you target and ostracize other people. What does one do? What does a young person do when they're caught? When you see these parents out here with their children, I've always said this, folks, and when I say these things, it's not just a hypothesis I've seen with my own eyes. These children will grow up to be more diabolical than their parents, or they'll grow up to hate their parents. They'll grow up to hate their parents, and some will be driven to killing them. God forbid. And then going to schools, as we see in the news. That's exactly how this mass killing in Texas unfolded. Sandy Hook and so many others, and I've written a blog about it and detailed all of these things in that deal on Richard Moore, SCDA WordPress. So there's been many schools of thought. Every now and then, there is a dark horse and there's a wild card. And so we haven't seen or nor heard the rest of Villion, the villain. You say it made him the villain. He wasn't the villain. He was a victim. He was a victim trying for self-preservation and to hopefully somehow preserve his child in a situation that staggers the imagination. But I think he knew more than many thought. The more the more that time passes, the more it comes to, it becomes clearer. I looked at the obituary, and it was a stab in the heart, because even in death, the community and whoever wrote that obituary took a last stab and slight. So many ways I won't go into it. But it starts out, met his maker in Biloxi. Where do they do that at? He's going to meet his maker. That's only said in a negative connotation. Period. That's inexcusable. They sent that last message to everybody else. This is what happens when you don't conform. But moreover, they sent that message to his child. We know that one of the most evil backbones, and they don't have backbones, of this criminal theater are the fraternal secret Freemasons. I think it's laughable. So I think from the grave, and I know from the grave, Villion has said something. What better place, his final resting place, to be in the Oddfellows Cemetery, a secret fraternal organization. In the town, they didn't want him. They bury him in Gulfport. He was born there. When we look at Gulfport, you look at another individual with a French last name, and he's still with us, the older Marlon Lefebvre. He spent his life in Southern gospel and gospel rock and roll. When Marlon Lefebvre was a teenager and in the military, was in Jackson, South Carolina. They was having a gospel convention in Memphis, and Lefebvre hitchhiked 600 miles to get there because he was going to sing one song. And the song that he sang was Without You. What he didn't know is standing backstage was Elvis Presley. Elvis asked to meet Marlon Lefebvre after he heard him sing that song. And it was in very short order that Elvis went in the studio, and the album entitled How Great Thou Art, he recorded that very song. So for those that are listening, when you get through with this, just go to Marlon Lefebvre. There's some good live recordings. Without You, and listen to it again for the first time. And when you listen to those words, and that coupled with the story I just told you, it only gets better. So I think that in the future, people will know more about this man that they have tried to cloak and fluff, that they were quick to, but his obituary reflects, but they still made that jab. They made that jab. And that is, it's unexcusable. But his son has to realize that he was given a gift too. Was some people are given a gift of talk. I talk a lot. And many have said a wordsmith of such. I usually don't have a loss for words. And I know a lot of you wished I would, but I don't. Neither does his son. A formidable wordsmith in his own right. But a different kind of wordsmith, which is a gift. And a gift that only comes from God. And if you don't think that evil will do everything, evil doesn't care about your future. Evil doesn't care what your calling is. Evil does not care. And this program has proven, and I've watched it in real time, do everything to destroy Villion's son, just like it did Villion, and destroy me as well. But here's the anomaly. The devil's not going to get this one. The devil's not going to get it. And so for those that don't know, now you know. And I think it's fitting that the son's idol. His first one. It was been a bunch of them. As far as music and hip hop. This couldn't be a better fitting time. Chance he may never see this, and it's not intended, but it's intended to clear the record. And it says, stay far from timid, only make moves when your heart's in it. And live the phrase, sky's the limit. Notorious B.I.G. And after giving a thought of what was not in the obituary and of what I know, Villion didn't have burial insurance. And the son was told, and this was the story, that a mystery man paid for everything. I've never met that mystery man, but I know his name. And believe it or not, his last name is Biggs. And so the sky is the limit for those that have come under this and you think there is no way out. I'm here to tell you, there is a way out. There's people, I do what I do, not for me, but for those out there that have reached a point of there's no answers. There's no solution. I believe this with all of my heart and soul, that your best days are ahead of you. Those things that have faded and are long in the rearview mirror, something greater and better is ahead of you. If your faith and your heart's in the right place. And there's nothing this program of the world can do to take that away, because they didn't give it. It wasn't manufactured. And that's the very thing that they're attacking. When you feed the beast and you feed into this and the torment and you dwell in the woe is me, you're feeding it. It's when you say, hey, enough's enough. Enough is enough. I'm a joint heir to the royal priesthood. And my friend, if that doesn't give you a different perspective, something's wrong. That's who we're praying for. And so I'm going to close this with, you'll just get a snippet of the son, but I wanted to make sure that the real villain and the killing fields of Rose Hill, ladies and gentlemen, is not the villain. As it turns out, the villain is the good guy. Everything about this program is reversed. The stalkers call the victims stalkers. It's a play on words. But it's a play. What I'm giving you is reality. And so I'm giving you the victory story. We're going to hear more about the villain, Villion. Because as we tell his story, we're telling your story. And for those that think that he wasted his life are dead wrong. his granddaughter should grow up knowing that she, in fact, is a granddaughter of a mighty good person. A person that his story and what he went through helped change the lives of so many people for the better. Because it won't be coming from many other places. But through what he had to endure and what the sacrifices and the pain, it was meant for good. If we can't learn from our past mistakes, ladies and gentlemen, we won't get any better in the future. I refuse to sit by idle while those in society dismiss a parent or a child as a nobody or as a waste. That's very offensive. And it's my job to relentlessly, on a grand scale, to give voice to those people and to give voice to those families to say, hey, it wasn't a waste. They was somebody. That was somebody's child, mother or dad. And for that reason, we're going to keep exposing the evil. And I'm going to call it like I see it. It ain't no other way to do it. Let me hear from you. I have my contact information in the comments section, and how you can support what we're doing here, and links to our petition and to the Brady list, etc., etc. Until next time, God bless you. That's a lot. You go ahead and get it, go ahead and get it.